Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. We can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
All right, guys. Hey, look, I'm like almost exactly on time here. You're gonna see the open here in 10 seconds. Good morning, Octavius, by the way. There we go. Well, we're getting into kind of the deeper parts of the roll, so could be some tough trading out there. Let's come and look at the charts and see where we are at. So here's the 10-year treasuries. After quite a bit of, I would say, relatively aggressive buying yesterday that sputtered out, and then we went back and forth a ton. The overnight action, though, has been pretty much like all down. There's still some ways to go if we're going to test the bottom end of these range. There is a bit of a trend line there. Or no, we did break a trend line. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it really means anything, but here we got the S&P 500 is struggling a little bit here, but I think a little bit of sideways action before we like actually go for highs would be appropriate. And hey, we are coming into one of the weakest seasonal parts of the year, so there is some reason to be cautious here. Oil had such a big run yesterday. It has kind of died out, but I'd say that they're holding those gains pretty well. We had like multiple headlines, but I think that the one that was having the biggest impact was the report that Libya was basically halting production. Gold and silver still doing okay, holding their gains as well, kind of up there in the upper end of that range. Copper showing some signs of life and maybe even actually starting to develop a little bit of a trend. And then, of course, we got the Japanese yen still looking pretty good in the Japanese yen. Every day that I come in here and I look at this, I'm like, okay, that's good. Like, what I would like to see is a very, very slow and gentle uptrend or sideways. And that's what we're getting. The dollar here now today, below 101. And of course, we got Bitcoin. Bitcoin took a bit of a run there, heading up towards 65,000, but then getting sold pretty hard. So, I think that it may be still some time before Bitcoin has a breakout, but it looks like it's holding this range well. So, all right. Good morning, Octavius, Namrus, and Uzi. Let's come in here, make sure that I've got all my ducks in a row here. We do have price index. We got price index, CB, consumer confidence, Richmond, Fed composite, 2-year auction. Oh, and rollover. So, rollover is not a flow that we've really ever discussed very heavily. And I guess that's because I don't really have any data that tells me that we're more or less likely to go up or down on rollovers. But it is a flow that is out there, and it seems to make trading very, very tricky for us. So, my take for today is cautious about trades due to So I'm only interested in getting a trade or really have a strong headline. All right. And with all of that in line, we don't really have a whole lot in the political. And oh, you know what? Actually, one other thing that we should mention is NVIDIA. NVIDIA earnings are tonight, I believe, right? But like in terms of news and things and so forth, I think the only really major headline I got yesterday was Jeff Zucker, or not Jeff. What is the guy's name? Mr. Zuckerberg admit that the Biden-Harris administration pressured Facebook to censor content in a letter to Congress, which is kind of curious. I wonder, I mean, like we knew that happened, right? People reported getting squelched when it happened. There were many news reports and so forth kind of suggesting that it happened. So I think that it happened shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But it's really curious that he puts that out now. Is it because Zuckerberg is just having like a change of heart, perhaps? That could be. I don't know. Just read on Axios that Harris is flip-flopping on the border wall of all things. Well, so there was they had an ad the other day. I didn't have the time to watch it. Didn't seem like it really picked up too much traction, but Harris had an ad making fun of Trump over the border wall. So like, well, okay, Ozzy's got a link. Let's read the link. Might as well. Axios is usually pretty good in terms of like telling us what the way the campaigns are going on these things. If she's elected, Kamala Harris pledges to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the wall along the southern border, a project she once opposed and called un-American during the Trump administration. Why it matters, it's the latest example of Harris flip-flopping on her past liberal positions, such as supporting Medicare for all and banning fracking, proposals that aides say she is now against. Harris is embracing a more hawkish immigration policy as Donald Trump's campaign spends tens of millions of dollars attacking her about the border. But she still has significant differences with Trump on immigration, opposing his approach to family separation and his plans for mass deportations. Okay, so maybe what she's doing is kind of more of like a strategic retreat, right? That like, okay, the border is a big deal. The border wall is not favorable ground for us. We need to back off on this, and then we can push back on things like mass deportations. Maybe. Oh, I see here. In her speech to the Democrat National Convention last week, Harris said she would sign the recent bipartisan security bill, which Trump had ordered his allies. I really absolutely despise the media narrative on the bipartisan border security bill. Okay? Because in my opinion, it's really the Rhino border security bill. Like, yeah, there were Republicans involved in negotiating it. The end result of that border security bill was absolutely atrocious. And I think that Republicans would be in a very, very difficult place with their base if they had passed that law. Everybody's acting like, oh, they gave Republicans everything that they wanted in a bipartisan deal and they just didn't go for it. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. The law that was coming out was terrible, didn't really give Republicans anything that they wanted, put Republicans in a terrible position because it basically would like increase immigration and make it difficult for them to push back against it in any legal way. It was a terrible bill. People say that Trump shot the bill down or told Republicans to kill the bill because he thought that it would be better for the election to leave it open, and that's nonsense. If he had told them to pass that bill, there would have been a revolt. But every media outlet that I see pushes that because they all wanted that bill to pass. Oh, and I guess what Axios is saying here is that the border wall is an important part of that of that bill. It's that you do increase border security. Well, so I don't know if that's like a super significant change in the race, but it is kind of interesting. What I continue to see with Harris is like it really feels like let's call it fake. Nothing is quote significant, sure. Yeah. No, I just everything that I see about the Harris campaign is fake. Like she's going and doing focus groups and polling and using that to decide what her positions are. And the reason that she's not really talking about positions or just like blatantly flip-flopping on things is because she knows that nobody is going to hold her to account. And it's more important and helpful to her to lie and flip-flop on them and be in line with whatever the polling backed answer is right now. Focus group is kind of the word that I keep searching for. It seems to me like she cares more about being in line with the focus group, accepted answer, which I gotta tell you, running your politics based off of focus groups tends not to work very well. Let's see here. The old idea of the last 8 years was to delegitimize the concept of the presidency, it seems to me. Yeah, we essentially don't have a president right now. It seems to me like there is a ton of significant things happening in the world right now that you would normally expect the president to say things and or do things about right now. And nothing's happening. Totally true. I don't know if there's some larger effort to like delegitimize the presidency per se, but with Harris running and everything, there's definitely people out there kind of trying to say that like who's president doesn't really matter and that it's who their advisors and so forth that matter. But I think that for the purpose of like who you vote for in November, that's like totally the wrong take. I think for the purposes of the election, that's totally the wrong take. Because the candidate includes that team. Like the whole process of going through a primary, running the general election campaign, doing press conferences, doing the debate, that is all the tryout for the candidate. And when I say the candidate, I really mean the team. And you're asking me to vote for somebody that basically just has, this basically just a sticker, a name on some black box without telling us anything about what's in the black box, right? And not showing us how the black box even works. I'm just saying unabashed, No, it does matter though. I mean, you can get away with, I think the whole thing is that our system is robust enough that you can get away with having a president that's pretty weak or is not doing anything. But the president has a lot of power, and if you have a president in there that is doing things, that has a significant impact on the direction of the country. Has a very, very significant, especially in the foreign policy space. Like, again, I don't really have a president right now, and I can just see where having such a passive president is kind of hurting, because you should have somebody out there saying stuff. It's better with the federal government doesn't do anything. Well, that they do. Like, here's the thing, though. One of the narratives that's definitely been out there since the Obama years, media talks about this all the time, right? Is that the markets hate uncertainty and they love gridlock. And they love it when the government isn't actually doing anything, right? The problem with that is that while Congress has not really been doing anything, and it's kind of a problem because we've got some major issues that kind of require Congress to do something, right? Meanwhile, the quote-unquote deep state, that is all of the regulatory industries, all of the individual employees, and the Treasury Department, or rather the U.S. Treasury, and all of these things, they're doing a lot. Okay. The administrative state since Obama's time has grown significantly and continues to overstep its bounds. And so it seems like maybe the government's not doing anything because Congress is not doing anything, but the federal government has actually been doing a lot, and a lot of damaging things too, by the way. In my opinion. At least in the current condition, just do nothing, please. Well, trying to readjust my my cast, I guess you call it. Seems to me like they built me kind of like a makeshift cast. Anyways, yeah. Well, okay, so I didn't see this ad as it related to the border wall, but I did see a Trump ad. And the Trump ad was like, was so brutal. Because it was basically, they had Kamala Harris saying all these things about, you know, how hard it is and how much the prices of everything has gone up. And then they juxtaposed that with Kamala Harris saying Bidenomics works. That I really think that you go to swing states, that's gonna really hurt. The debate you've been waiting for. You know what's something? So I was not like, I tell you what, with my day job, it comes in spurts. Like 2 weeks ago, I was taking it pretty light. Part of that was like, well, there was, I knew I was going to get the surgery and I didn't want to like have a bunch of like dangling jobs and everything while I'm going to be gone for 4-day weekend. But then the other part of it is just that, like, if there's an issue going on, we've been pretty good at issues not turning into fires, you know, where it actually affects the users. But there is stuff that I'm trying to get through as quickly as I can, because there are some infrastructure problems and everything that we're like a little bit concerned about. And so when I get into that mode, man, it's just go all day. It's really hard to stay organized too. It's a good thing that I have my notes. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't get all of the ends tied up. But so I was super, super busy yesterday. And something that I was kind of like, did I miss something? Was this whole debate thing. Because apparently Kamala Harris wants to change the rules of the debate. Like now she wants it to be no mics muted, when before it was that they had to be muted, and she wants to change the rules. But I didn't see where she or her camp said that. And the mainstream media isn't really presenting it that way. Like the mainstream media is presenting it as, well, Donald Trump is upset about the rules of the debate now. Maybe it's because Donald Trump doesn't actually want to do the debate. And I'm like, what? No, like, because it seems very clear to me, Donald Trump wants to do the debate very, very badly. Probably few things could help his campaign out more right now than a good debate. But he is upset about where the debate is and what the rules about the debate are going to be. So I think that that's the situation, is that Kamala wanted to change the rules of the debate. And I don't know if that means that like the debate is off again or not, but something is going on there. And maybe we'll get a resolution today. But that is one thing going on in the campaign. It's a big deal apparently. Dee says, good morning. How are you? Well, I am not really seeing a whole lot of activity. I'm not seeing a lot of activity in the shorter end of the curve. The 5 and the 10-year mid range of the curve look pretty dead, but I am seeing a significant amount of selling at the lows in the 30-year. Yesterday, the 30-year was the one that was buying hardest. Now, granted, my cumulative deltas that I have here, for some reason, NinjaTrader wanted to roll over ZB and UB and not the other ones. So I actually have ZB on December and the others not. Sent you a picture? Sure, let's look at your picture. A volume per tick has gone a bit higher. Well, yeah, I am not entirely sure what you're pointing is. Like you say 3K4 here, but where are you getting that from? The area that you're referring to is in black there. Well, like the first thing that I would say is that, like, let's go back to like, oh, okay. So you're saying the total volume divided by the number of ticks. Sure. So this is a metric that you can track. And I would say that if you're doing things algorithmically, that could be something worth tracking. But the issue is that, oh, by the way, did we just tick down? We did. The issue that you get there is there's multiple reasons why that can be happening, right? The biggest one that we got going on today is we've got a rollover. We've got a rollover, so you might see really weird things in that. You might see some situations where it takes a ton of volume per tick, and you might see some areas where it's not very much per tick at all. And that is just going to have to do with whether a large player is rolling at that time or not, right? Versus you might see a situation where we get a trend and there's not very much volume per tick on that trend, and it's because of a correlated instrument, right? So you're looking at a piece of information that requires a significant amount of other information of what do we call this? Man, I had the word in my head and then I lost it. I don't know what my issue is today with reaching for words. I guess my brain isn't completely going yet today. Context. So you're looking at something that requires a significant amount of context to interpret. And then after that, that doesn't necessarily tell you, are we going to go long or short or anything, right? But one would maybe, it is a good idea to maybe try and identify. I mean, I certainly noticed that, right, when we move and it's didn't take a lot of volume. But I'm kind of looking at it more like, okay, we had a trend, and what was the change in cumulative delta? That's kind of more interesting to me, right? But the context of this one, you're talking about a relatively dead time period. I mean, there is volume and there are people that begin to get active at that time, but really stuff before the regular session open, the pit session open in the treasuries is kind of like, well, that's the overnight action. It's less liquid. There's less players. It does bizarre things that you can't really explain because one guy coming in and doing something has such a big impact during that time. Right? So I wouldn't spend too much time on it. The one thing that I am seeing, though, that I think is very, very interesting is that in the front month here in ZB, there is definitely some selling. So let's pull up here. Another DOM. Let's do it on ZB. Oh, actually, we need to come into Jigsaw and update instruments. Update CBOT CME. And I guess okay, let's see if that got it. There we go. December. Okay, well, I would say that overall there is still more liquidity available in the back month. So I guess we hold our roll. It is though. In the back month, it was a change of about 4,000 contracts to the downside. I don't know what it was, because I have that chart already rolled over. I don't know what it was on the other side. Well, kind of poking around, seeing if there's any interesting discussion on Twitter and other places. Messaged Lowe's executives last week to let them know that I plan to expose their woke policies. this morning I woke up to an email where they preemptively made big changes. Jeez, that's... So it's like companies are doing the DEI policies because there's like the whole ESG incentives to do it. But then if the public finds out or catches on, then they like flip-flop super quickly. But especially Lowe's, I could see would have reason to do that because conservative people, I think in general, spend more time working on their house. Like, that's kind of what happens is when you get extra income, the wife coerces you into spending it on your yard rather than saving up and purchasing assets. Okay, so at the top of the hour, we have the red book that generally includes data that we already have, so the market doesn't move on it very much, but it is coming. Is your ZN contract on screen? No, it's still September. I pulled up ZB. Yeah, I pulled up ZB on December, and there was still more liquidity on September. I didn't look at ZN, but I looked at ZB because I was seeing some pretty wild changes in cumulative delta on the December contract. It's weird. So I don't know if you can... I know that the text is super small, but my ZB is set to 12, but then my ZN and my ZF is not. So the settings in NinjaTrader are a little bit wonky. The rollovers aren't correct anyways. That's one of those things that if I was using like the newest version of NinjaTrader that has all of the built-in user login and new user login and licensing stuff that I don't use because it doesn't give me access to Rhythmic, maybe those would be fixed. Oh, yours did the same thing. It wanted to roll over ZB and UB, but not the others. It's kind of weird. My arm today, my elbow, man. Yesterday I was working through this issue with a coworker, trying to figure out what on this box was using memory. Because it was really weird, like, our process was not using as much memory as we thought it should. But then there was, like, no available memory on the box, and we couldn't figure out what was using it. And it was like you pull up the task manager and you couldn't see it. And so we were, like, pulling up the performance monitor and trying to sort things out through that. But there's some kind of weird things with the performance monitor where, like, if you're looking at processes that are named the same thing, different metrics with them will attach themselves to different numbers. It's weird. Anyways, and my arm just started to itch like crazy. I could not focus at all. I finally said, you know what, like, it's the end of your day anyways. He was in the Eastern time zone, so yeah, I think we should break here, and I got to do something about my arm. It's just like crazy. And then we unbandaged it and rebandaged it with newer stuff, and it felt so good. I'm giving it some air. This morning it doesn't itch, but I didn't put the cast in so tight, so I can't like leverage the cast against itself, against my arm to like support my arm. And so instead I'm just kind of resting the cast on the table and like pushing my arm into the cast But like that elbow is sore, is very sore. That elbow, you know, it's bruised up, whatever. So that kind of hurts. So then I'm kind of like, I need to pick it up a little bit. How can I? But then the issue is that I want to sit so close to the table. I don't know what to do. Anyways. And then, like, the way that I'm holding it is kind of like putting tension on my bicep. So, like, my bicep is getting super, super tired. But you know what? This is better than yesterday. Because yesterday was, like, kind of scary. Today, look, we had like 2 or 3 ticks down in ZN, but I'd say it's pretty quiet right now. We do have some numbers and news coming up later, so we might get a little bit, but today is turning a little bit more to what I think it should be. I'll pop over here to Reddit. I made a post on the DaVinci Resolve subreddit. So, like, with DaVinci Resolve Cloud, one of the things is that you can tell it to sync your proxies only, or the proxies and the source material. And the thing with the proxies is basically what you can do is you can say, okay, like, here's the source video. That's like when you're rendering and everything, that's what you should use. But when I'm editing, I want to use this other file that's better for editing. And there's 2 reasons you can do that. One is because you can edit faster. So, like, most video codecs, what they do is they say, here's like a frame. This is what it looks like. And then all of the frames that follow that are just what's different from that keyframe to this frame. So when you do that, you can really, really compress things down because it's kind of like temporal compression. But the problem with it is that it takes longer to read. If I want to go to a specific frame, I have to first go back, find the last keyframe, then do all of the calculations to get to the current frame. And so when you're video editing, what that looks like is you scrub around in the video and you go to a specific area in the video, and it takes a few seconds before you actually see the frame, essentially, right? So what you do is you convert it over to something that just each frame is different. They're compressed, but each frame is different. Those use a lot more space. They edit better, but they use a lot more space. And I thought, oh, like, you compress it down. So you want a proxy that's like super compressed, then I can get a proxy that's more compressed than my source of videos to like send to people. Well, DaVinci Resolve basically doesn't have options that are like that. The options for proxies and optimized media are basically always larger. So doing this whole thing with Blackmagic Cloud is like putting the videos up for 1 day is 10 to 20 gigabytes of space. 10 to 20 gigabytes of space on an account that you're going to have like maybe 500 gigabytes to 2,000 gigabytes. Not very practical. And then the guy that wanted to edit, who is in over there in India, Pakistan area, doesn't have super spectacular internet, so it takes forever to download. So I was like trying to figure out, oh, is there a better way to do this? And it didn't really answer the question. It was one of those things where it was like, well, because I used the word proxy, they only go into, they heard that word, and so they go into what they know about proxy. And like, well, the proxy is not necessarily smaller, but not actually looking at what it was that I was trying to do and giving me a good answer. So I'm still getting responses from Reddit about that aren't very good. It really makes me think of that whole like dead internet theory, because like more and more I feel like that the people that are responding to you on social media are like not even reading what you're posting. It's super annoying. Maybe if I get my arm like that, that's better. Cross my body. Maybe I just need a sling. Maybe I just need to get a sling. Oh, this is bound to be a great thread on r/economics. Should the world's richest 1% who gained 42 trillion in a decade be taxed more? Oh, I thought it said should. Shouldn't. Like the whole thing here is that if you're gonna say that they should be taxed more, how do you prove that they should? Because all the arguments that I ever see on this subject basically come down to moral arguments, which are like kind of dependent on whether or not you share the moral framework of the commenter or the author, let's say, right? Like if you go through like what I think is like the most natural, intuitive set of morality for people, it's like the morality of the home, that like everything should be relatively equal, sort of a thing, right? That doesn't scale beyond your house. So when we scale beyond our house, we kind of have to sit down and say, what is the actual net impact of our tax policy? And does our tax policy actually help our economy or not? I don't think that we should be setting our tax policy based on, because these people are just rich. Now, there is something to be said that if we need revenue, there tends to be a more progressive tax curve tends to be better because those people that are richer can afford to pay that better. And so you can tax more from them without it having a net negative effect on them and the economy. But there's still a downside, because that generally tends to come from assets, right? Like basically you tax them, that's less assets that they can buy, which basically means less money in the markets fueling innovation and funding companies and stuff. The richest people on Earth combined don't have enough money to tax to give people the BS they want. Yeah, part of the problem is definitely that the public seems to have settled on a set of services that they believe the government should provide that I'm not sure is actually sustainable. Like maybe in the time period after the war, when, just an insane amount of wealth was being created and coming into the United States, it was an unusual time period that I would not consider normal. It's not realistic to think that the economy will always run that well, So like we kind of gave people those services, or moved towards giving people those services during that time. And now we're coming back more towards normal economic times, if not kind of economic times where on a society level we kind of have to scrimp and save because our population is declining. You can't expect to have all of those goodies still. So, like, what is the actual reasonable, like, set of services, right? Well, this is something that I think you can actually do a good bit of research on. Because, for instance, like, services to help the homeless and the poor and so forth, there's a good deal of research that suggests that those factors have a negative impact on the society and the private sector as a whole. And so it is really, really beneficial to have the government take some money out of the economy and dump it into that hole and fill that hole, essentially. Right? But then you start to get into this other problem, which is that it's too complicated of a problem. That's where we get into this book right here that I've been talking about. I'm not too far. I think I'm maybe a tenth of the way into it. Making Sense of Chaos. It's about complexity economics. And what defines something as complex in their definition of things is that there are emergent properties from the whole that you would never be able to see from the individual components. So that is very much something that happens in the market, is that, like, when you look at everybody's individual orders and how you trade and possible strategies that you might be using, and I think that that's the kind of model that most people try to use, is they say, well, what would I do? What am I doing? What do I think other people are doing? Right? And when you look at it on that level, it tends not to create very good predictions. Why? Because the combination of everybody trading and reacting to each other creates emergent properties that you can't see without being able to look at the whole system. So in the past, basically the only way that we can see these properties is by letting the system run and seeing them at the high level, right? But in complexity economics, what we're doing now is we're saying, well, if we create an agent-based model whereby we create a little computer model that represents different types of people and those different types of people making different decisions. Some people being driven by strict rules about the way that their fund is supposed to operate. Other people possibly being driven by just pure random chance. And you have all of those agents interact with each other. And if you have good agent models, sometimes you can duplicate those higher level emergent behaviors. And now all of a sudden you have something that actually makes good predictions, essentially, right? So we have this issue in our society where, like, what is the optimal solution is a little bit difficult to wrap our hands around. And we're only just now starting to get into the science that can maybe answer some of those questions, right? I think that in the next 10 to 20 years, we'll have those answers. But then the problem is going to be you have so many large players entrenched in the system and so much corruption in the system that even if you know what the correct answer is, good luck on getting it implemented. So it's a very complicated issue. This is why I kind of am anti-plutocrat, Because, or like, I would like to know what is optimal policy and all of those sorts of things. It's just that, like, the science that we have isn't good enough to be giving them that kind of power yet, for starters. And then doesn't mean that they're actually going to do the right thing. Because what we see happening so far is that they just do what's best for them rather than what would be best for the society. Let's see what this guy says. One of these days, I'd like to hear the actual moral rationale behind allocating the vast majority of the riches we've managed to extract from human labor and the natural environment to a fleetingly minuscule portion of our species. Well, when you say it is like we're allocating it mostly to them, what you're really saying is like they're rich and I'm not, and I wish I was more rich. But most of this capital, they're not, they personally are not actively using it, right? It stays in the market. And so that's the first thing, is that the capital allocation is actually largely to the public market. Okay, so why should we give why they still have power over it? They still have the power to make those decisions and make big decisions for the rest of society. Why do we give them that? Because regular people don't want to deal with it. Still pretty quiet over there in the treasuries. Writing up a little thread here on Reddit. There we go. So this is one of those things that, like, it kind of, that post kind of hit into, like, my key, well, I want to call it my key issue. I feel like that there's a more sophisticated way of saying that, but basically, like, when I look at society, this to me is the crux of it, is that you have to decide where we're going to allocate capital. We decide to allocate capital through the market because that tends to result in the best outcome for growth and innovation. And the problem with that system is that you get a small amount of people end up making all of the decisions. And why is that? Well, part of it is just because wealth does tend to accumulate. Whoever was the best at that is going to accumulate all of the wealth, right? But even if that wasn't a factor, I think you'd still have a problem. Why? Because most people don't care to do the work involved in managing an investment portfolio like that. You can only keep track of so many companies. Just being, super involved in knowing all of the workings of 5 companies to the level that one should be as an investor is a difficult thing to do. And most people aren't going to spend their free time making discounted cash flow spreadsheets and reading earnings reports to decide which companies deserve the capital. So you get these people that are in charge of the market. They know that the decisions that they make have a significant impact, and the other people aren't going to do it. And so they know that it's just kind of left up to them to make those decisions. They make those decisions, and then everybody else has to deal with the consequences of it. The decision isn't what the rest of us would actually want. And now, after we've kind of pushed off that duty, we come in, we suffer the consequences, and only then are we upset. That's what happens. That's what's happening. kind of looking at this in the 10-year of the DOM there. Okay, so like there's a decent offer at 10.5 right now, but you know, like the bid at 10 is okay. That could flip very easily. It's kind of given me a hint that they may want to flip around and start testing the upper side of this now. Here's somebody again with the unrealized capital gains tax. You know, I actually, who was it? Bill Ackman actually had a comment on that I thought was pretty good. At least it's worth looking into, right? They was saying, well, the solution to the unrealized capital gains thing, because it maybe is a problem if you hold everything in stocks and never sell the stocks and ergo never have to pay any taxes on it, then you know, that's wealth that the government intends to pull out of the system and they can't. Bill Ackman was saying what you should do is only tax people if they borrow more than their basis. So if they borrow from their stock portfolio and the amount that they borrow is more than the basis of the you know, all of those stocks when they first bought them, then you would be affected by a tax of some sort. So I'm not saying that that's like the correct solution per se. That would require a lot more study to determine what the impacts of that is, but it sounds like something worth looking into. Why is NinjaTrader asking just for the rollover for ZB and UB? I don't know. It did the same thing for me. I just rolled the ZB over and was like, whatever. I'm watching the DOM here anyways. I don't think anything's going to happen today. Probably the rest of them roll over tomorrow. And then you're going to see more of the market rolling over and the volume and the liquidity moving over tomorrow as well at that point, because then you're into first call. I guess not. They ticked down. I was saying maybe they want to test the upper side of this. Didn't go for it. Moved down. What's this? Most popular grocery store by state? And in Utah, they say it's Safeway? I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true in Utah. I bet you more people go to Walmart for their groceries than anywhere else. Octavia says a 7 tick narrow initial balance, so we should have a good breakout trade. No, I don't agree with that one. I don't agree with that at all. I think 7 tick narrow initial balance means that we're not likely to see very much activity the rest of the day. And while there might be moves and quote unquote breakouts, they're unlikely to be the sort that we can predict. The December contract looks weird. Seems like they're accepting the lower prices. Yeah, well, the December ZB contract is very weird because they like sold super hard and it seems like a massive change in cumulative delta. Even though in the other instruments there's nothing really going on. It does kind of look to me like they are rolling over though. Today's move was already done overnight. It's a little curious how quickly they flip down and are testing the bottom side of this larger midterm range. I kind of thought that they would spend a little bit more time up there at the high weekly highs. The slowness is actually kind of making me feel a little bit sleepy. I don't think I should be sleepy though. I feel like I got an okay night's rest. I might be a little bit off because I can't really lift. I could maybe squat, but I would need help. I didn't walk yesterday. I should do some walking. Long walk, burn off some energy. Still, would that make me feel sleepy? I don't know. It's probably just because it's a little bit warm in this room. Already gotten a response here on this Reddit thread, but the response makes no sense. We don't allocate capital? Okay. It is earned as wealth, and then the earner decides if they want to use it as capital. Okay, right, but the majority of the money that we're talking about ends up in the market. So, whatever. R/science. Dude, okay. I'm almost a little bit nervous to read this one, but I think it's kind of funny, so I'm going to read it. From r/science, a new study suggests that the stresses associated with the COVID-19 pandemic were felt more acutely by those on the political left. Republicans who are more resistant to public health measures like mask wearing and vaccination may have had less pandemic-related stress and maintained better sleep. Or they're more likely to live in a conservative area where the policies were different. Yeah. Oh, there are some negative consequences from some of those policies. Yes. That one's. You need a study to tell you that. Okay. So here's something that's been going on Reddit that I think is incredibly interesting. I keep seeing it over and over again. So here's the r/advice animals sub. By the way, what is with the way that this guy is putting the text on the meme and everything? I don't think that he used the meme generators. It looks like he did it himself. But here this guy saying that Donald Trump is going to chicken out of the debate. I guarantee it. I see a post like this almost every day. It's so bizarre to me that the left is absolutely convinced that Donald Trump is afraid of debating Kamala Harris. That's so wild to me. Kamala's the one that wants to change the rules. Here again, there's something going on with that, and I don't feel like I'm getting the full story. just saw a confession bear that I'm not going to repeat. Oh, I missed Hal's comment here that probably can move after the CB numbers. You might be right. I think that at the top of the hour, we should get a move. I'm kind of worried, though, that it will be one of those, like, it instantly moves and then, like, it's over sort of a thing, you know? They did get a little bit of a reprieve. It does look like now they're testing the upper end of this, and I am seeing a pretty consistent buy through this in ZN. So if this was not rollover and everything, I would maybe be getting the technical signs that I need to be able to go long. Although I don't have anything through my synopsis of the flows that really strongly suggests to me that we should be moving long today. Biden and Harris administration withdraws Secret Service protection for RFK Jr. after he suspends the campaign. And liberals on Reddit are all saying, oh yeah, that's totally appropriate. Dude, that's kind of... Do you think that the rules are that you're not a... Well, but he is technically still a candidate, right? Watching Reddit argue this stuff is really weird. I feel like so far, though, with this election that Reddit has been wrong about things like almost every step of the way. So it's just really fascinating to me to see them fall into the same stupid kind of logical mistakes. She wants to have notes and unmuted microphones. See, look at so the way this freaking works, man. This, am I the only one that reads this stuff and is like, what the hell is with these people? Okay. Import Piglet 7363. It's Harris trying to rewrite the CNN rules that her party agreed to. Now she wants to have notes and unmuted mics. The Republicans are ready to debate with the agreed upon rules. What's the matter? Is she afraid she can't remember everything her handlers have told her to say? Question mark. Okay. Trump can't remember the beginning of his sentences by the time he gets to the end. Who the F do you people think you're trying to kid with this stuff at this point? Like, this is a nonsense response. He is not really responding to anything that this guy said. So it's like, well, maybe Kamala can't remember things. well, Donald Trump can't remember things. Okay, so then if that was really what you say, then wouldn't Donald Trump also want the rules to be changed like that anyways? Like, it's just what drives a response like this? I can't even imagine like the mindset of a person that responds in this way. And then like 3 people upvote that. It's like this is like a cognitive dissonance response. So they can't justify why Harris is trying to change the rules. They just change the subject and get angry and attack Donald Trump. I just don't understand how you could be so, lack self-awareness so much. Does kind of make me wonder if Kamala's just trying, because I also don't see how these rules help her. I kind of almost wonder if she's just trying to change the rules to get Trump upset and possibly make the debate not happen. I can't even get this overused meme template correct. OV, you didn't do it correctly. Kamala is the one pushing to change the agreed terms, not Trump. You mean by keep? No, she's changing them, is she not? Trump should demand a box of tampons be placed on top of his podium. Oh, man. Skilled opponent. She's a drunk DEI hire that literally slept her way to the top. Hey, have you seen these videos where people are trying to claim that Kamala Harris is actually drunk during a lot of the talks that she's giving and stuff? On one hand, I'm kind of like, there's no way that you could have somebody at that level being drunk all the time and it like being hidden and everybody just going along with it and that sort of thing, right? Like, you can't put somebody like that in power because that's going to have negative consequences on the country as a whole, and I would expect pretty much anybody involved in the politics at that level to understand that. Okay, so I highly doubt the allegation, but when I watch the videos, I'm like, there is something kind of loopy about her. There is something kind of loopy about the way that she's saying things and what she's saying and stuff. So I don't get this. There's like some news story somewhere that I'm missing, because I haven't seen anywhere where there was a story about, Kamala changing the word. All I got was the Donald Trump tweet tirade. Okay. Despite insisting that the Biden agreement bound Trump to the ABC debate on September 10th, the campaign now wants the rules changed. Here, linking a political story. Quote, "We have told ABC and other networks seeking to host a possible October debate that we believe both candidates' mics should be live throughout the full broadcast," Brian Fallon, the Harris campaign senior advisor for communication, tells Politico. "Our understanding is that Trump's handlers prefer the muted microphone because they don't think their candidate can act presidential for 90 minutes on his own." This is probably true. It seems to me that the muted microphone kind of helped Trump with the debate with Biden. "We suspect Trump's team has not even told their boss about this dispute because it would be too embarrassing to admit that they don't think he can handle himself against Vice President Harris without the benefit of a mute button." Yeah, this is so weird, right? Because Trump was the one that was mad about that, and Biden wanted them off. Let's see here. Trump campaign revealed just how far Team Kamala wanted to go in renegotiating the rules. "Enough with the games. We accepted the ABC debate under the exact same terms as the CNN debate. The Harris camp, after having already agreed to the CNN rules, asked for a seated debate with notes and opening statements. We said no changes to the agreed upon rules," Jason Miller, senior advisor for Trump, told Playbook last night. "If Kamala Harris is not smart enough to repeat the messaging points her handlers want her to memorize, that's her problem." This seems to be a pattern for the Harris campaign. They won't allow Harris to do interviews, they won't allow her to do press conferences, and now they want to give her a cheat sheet for the debate. My guess is that they're looking for a way to get out of any debate with President Trump. So, does this actually turn into Kamala Harris wants the rules changed? Trump says no change, we don't agree to any change. Kamala drops out. Except for that they have to do it in a way that makes it seem like Donald Trump is the one that's dropping out of it. That brings us to Trump's statement earlier today. Contra Fallon, Trump was very well apprised of the situation and grasped it better than Fallon thinks. Trump can take or leave the microphone rule, he explains, but the real issue is that Kamala doesn't want to debate. Either that or her campaign doesn't, for good reason. "We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it on, probably on. But the agreement was that it would be the same as last time. In that case, it was muted. I didn't like it last time." Huh. But it worked out for me. Fine. I mean, ask Biden how it worked out. It was fine. I think it should be the same. We agreed to the same rules and same specifications. And I think that's probably what it should be. But they're trying to change it. The truth is, they're trying to get out of it because she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person. She doesn't want to debate. We'll see. I would think that you make a bunch of bluster about it, and then ultimately he agrees to those new rules that they want. Except for not a cheat sheet. You shouldn't get a cheat sheet. Like, maybe you can take notes during the debate, but you can't put anything on it before the debate. Oh, I forgot about this. Flashback. Kamala Harris melted down in 2020 vice president debate against Mike Pence. Yeah, I vaguely remember that. I remember her debating Pence and thinking that Pence won. But I also don't remember it being like a huge deal. 13 wants Trump to be able to badger her so that she can complain about being interrupted and change the subject, as she did against Mike Pence 4 years ago. That explains one rule change demand, perhaps, but why demand to be seated and why demand notes? These look like demands posed for a different purpose, when seen in totality. For one thing, even Biden's team didn't demand those, even though Biden clearly could have used both. These look like attempts to toss obstacles into the process to derail the debates, and that impression is fortified by Harris's refusal to answer questions about policy or performance on the record under any circumstances, no matter how adversarial or not the event might be. Well, okay, so why do you want it to be seated? Because Kamala Harris will look like a midget next to Donald Trump. That's why. Kamala Harris is 5'4", and Donald Trump is like 6'2", right? So he would be like almost a whole foot above her. Even with like a stool and all of that, he's gonna look like a giant next to her. And campaigns care about those optics. That's why they want it to be seated. Well, we'll see if there's any developments on that one today. So weird. Look, here's another shitty r/advice animal prediction. Trump is going to dump J.D. Vance for Kennedy. I guarantee it. Well, he can't. It's already been decided, and there's like legal reasons why you can't change that now. So. when I see this stuff on Reddit, is it like, why do I see so many of the stupid, shitty political predictions? This guy, the I guarantee it guy, was the Men's Warehouse guy. Why am I seeing so many Men's Warehouse memes? It was not always like this. Is that just the thing now? Is this part of some sort of organized, like, I'm not saying that this guy is a shill or anything, but like there could be an organized effort to push this particular meme, and he's just kind of going along with the trend, you know? I just don't understand how people that seem to be so clueless about the political world can make such dumb predictions so confidently. It's been proven and peer-reviewed across multiple blind studies that the left can win. To that point, because the Harris campaign came in like pretty hot, trying to like make this a meme thing and all of that, but it doesn't really seem to be hitting. There's not any meme that I can think of that they have like brought to popularity or anything like that. It really does kind of feel, well, I would say it goes further than that though. I don't think it's that the left can't meme. I think it's that the establishment can't meme. And that isn't to say that like the establishment is bad at it or something like that. I think that memeing by its very nature is kind of counter-establishment. You know what I mean? So it will always be the people that are seemingly out of power that have the best meme game. Because when I was a kid, the first time that I ever saw memes in politics were coming from Democrats. It was before the advice animals era. But I remember when Bush was in charge, okay, and like websites like moveon.org were just being created, thinking that the left had a better meme game. Right? So is it because, their meme game was never actually very good, it's just that the Republicans hadn't come into their own yet? Okay, here's the consumer confidence, by the way. Or is it because they were out of power at the time? Bush was in charge. He had a large enough majority in Congress that they were able to push through most of the things that they wanted. Planning on going short? Well, if you forced me to place a trade, I'm going to go in line with whatever has been the majority of the trend in cumulative delta in the 10-year treasury, and that is up. So if you were going to force me to take a trade, it would be long. So let's see here. CB consumer confidence came in at 103.8 versus an expected 100.8. So that is a number that I would say is slightly hot, I guess you could say. It's going to cause the treasuries to sell off. But we also had the Richmond Fed Composite Index that was much worse than expected, negative 19 versus negative 14. So those maybe cancel each other out a little bit. It does look to me like the flow is to the short side off of the news, but I'm not actually seeing a lot of flow trading on it. Probably the rollover is just causing people to sit on their hands. What's this video you got here? Oh, it's that AI video with, oh, this is a new one. Trump, RFK Jr., and Elon dancing. There's somebody else on Reddit from r/Wall Street Bets Elite. Unrealized gains tax is bullshit. So I had this thought yesterday. Here, look, tell me what you think about this. Okay. It seems to me that there are two types of politicians. Those that don't understand the economics, and those that understand the economics but lie anyways. So you will see all sorts of politicians that will propose economically disastrous policies that they know are bad because they know that the economically illiterate will eat them up. This is primarily a tactic employed by the left. And I would argue that I would rather have the person that is economically ignorant than the person that is manipulating the economics. Because the person that's economically ignorant, you at least have a chance that they're trying to do the best by people and they're just misinformed. And maybe if you inform them better, you get the right advisors involved and all of that, that they can still make good decisions. Whereas the person that lies because they know that their base and so forth will eat it up, that's a person that's just interested in power. That's a person that's going to employ just about any tactic they can come up with to centralize more and more power in themselves. Those are the ones that I think you want to keep out of office the most. So I will always take the one that's ignorant over the one that is manipulating. But then that begs the question, is Donald Trump ignorant or manipulating when it comes to some of his bad economic policies? It seems to me like he genuinely believes that tariffs is a way forward. The left is better than the right at making incredibly stupid ideas sound incredibly smart. Well, they have academia. Like this is, again, I think that this is an example of complexity dynamics. That the behavior at the large scale, there are emergent properties of a complex system, essentially. And there are emergent properties of the intellectual university system, essentially. And I think that the public is largely ignorant to what those dynamics have become. And those dynamics are not, let's go and seek the truth, let's do the best research, let's yada, 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 yada. No, it's largely, they want to aggrandize themselves. They want to make the most money for themselves. And they push agendas. The university system, I think, needs some big changes. Or let's say the peer-reviewed research system. Because just as an example, this stuff about complexity dynamics and this stuff about market microstructure has largely been ignored by mainstream economics, even though it's very quality research. Credentialism works so good on regular people who fancy themselves to be intellectuals. Subreddit that makes me think about that subreddit, decoding the gurus. Because the more that I read that subreddit, the more that the conclusion I'm coming to is that what they don't like is uncredentialed experts, essentially. Because the group of people that they lump into that category is like so incredibly broad. And it basically ends up being anybody that's conservative and on social media. Like they call Ben Shapiro a guru. I'm like, he's a political commentator, not a guru. Like, that's ridiculous. Well, I have to say, like, the best research is going to be empirically backed and peer reviewed. That's really important, because the peer reviewed part is the second stage, really. So, like, the first stage is realizing that these heuristics that humans tend to rely upon, like somebody else's credentials, how reputable they are, etc., 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 do not work for these extremely complicated subjects, because, like, what you're talking about, something that, like, nobody actually knows the correct answer to. So if you're going to say something, you should be able to back it up with data from the actual world or from the actual market, right? That's empirical evidence. So empirical evidence is a really key development in society that was kind of one of the key things that pushed us into the Age of Enlightenment, okay? Once empirical evidence is a thing, the problem that you have is that people will try and fake empirical evidence. They will construct experiments and everything that try to say things but have significant logical flaws in them. And so that's why you have to have peer review, is that people have to go and look at the paper from a logical standpoint and point out all of the errors and fix those errors before we say it's available for public consumption. Now, I take issue with the idea that, like, the peer review is supposed to be what makes it reputable, because now you're falling back into that using reputation heuristic, when really what it means is, okay, it's good research that is worth our time. Now we can read and actually see what the empirical evidence says and make some decisions for ourselves. Because the reality is, especially in the psychology, social policy sort of arena, there's been a lot of nonsense that gets through the peer review process, right? What do you do when you have empirically proven stuff that has to make it through empirically motivated peer reviews filled with people terrified of publicly agreeing with your empirically proven thing? You post it on archive.org. That's the way that it works, is you do the research, you write it up, you put it on archive.org, and then journals will say, oh, this is good, here, review it, ask you to make some changes, publish it in their journal. If nobody wants to pick it up, it just stays on archive.org. Now, what does that mean, though? You can't necessarily trust every study that's on archive.org. Like, what are they actually saying? What is the actual, is the evidence that they're presenting empirical evidence? Can they show that their process is actually really saying what they think it does? Because I've seen this one guy that keeps posting stuff on archive.org that basically trying to prove that, like, successful retail traders are a thing, I think is kind of like his main point. And the way that he's doing this is complete nonsense. It's like, well, I will compare somebody else's trades to my trades. It's like, that's not like a real scientifically designed study. What those really are is they are marketing material disguised as studies. They're intended to get people to wonder, and go and look the person up and go to his website and buy his stuff. So, like, but then that comes into, like, the world that we live in, which is like, listen, anybody can say something, and anybody can do the research and provide us something, and we can look and learn from it. The thing that's, and people are so lazy. People are so lazy that we don't really have to deal with that. At least for us, with the kind of research that we do, we don't have to deal with that problem so much, because people are lazy, right? Most people out there are not saying, oh, I have an idea about the market and I'm going to go and do my research and create some empirical evidence and then show it to you. And there's all sorts of flaws in their studies and their research is total nonsense. And there's very, very few people, you know, even trying to create the research. Instead, what they do is they use their intuition based on the rules that they know about the market to come up with theories about how they think that the market should behave based on that information. And, you know, they don't try and verify it against empirical data at all because they lack the skill to do that. So, you know, most of the information out there, like that's the thing, is you're looking at everything that you can read about trading. And if you just say, I'm going to ignore everything that doesn't have empirical evidence, that filters out 99.99% of the stuff that's out there. And yeah, maybe you are filtering out stuff that is good. Maybe somebody's figured something out and they don't have the empirical evidence to back it up. But it's not worth it, because the amount of good quality stuff, once you filter it down to that and you're looking at the stuff that's empirically backed and peer reviewed, there's so much good stuff to work from and then build your own research on that it's kind of pointless to try sifting through all the trash. It's kind of like, oh, I want to find diamonds. Well, here's this guy, he has a diamond mine. Should I go into the diamond mine or should I try sweeping the streets to find diamonds? You know? Like, if you sweep the streets, like if you go to New York and you like sweep all of the trash up out of the crevices and things like that, probably will find some gems. You're not going to find as many if you go into a diamond mine. Because a diamond mine is a place where we already have hard evidence that there's diamonds. But you know what else, though? I kind of blame these problems more on... to me, this comes back to this idea that markets are not efficient. That might seem like a really big leap, but I really think that it comes back to the myth that markets are efficient. See, people want to feel good about themselves. People want to feel valuable. And the way that we have chosen to, like, the most prominent thing for valuing people, I'm not saying that it's correct or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is the thing that society sees and talks and looks at the most, is how much success you've had in the world, particularly monetary success, right? So the problem is that the people that make money, it's not necessarily because they were the smartest people, you know, but we kind of associate money with that. And we also associate being smart with making a lot of money. And so you have all of these people, especially Democrats, who, again, their greatest fear seems to be being socially rejected, is kind of like their greatest fear. Like the whole thing about like, oh, Republicans are weird, that really actually tells you more about the Democrats. Like that's the way that they see the world, is they don't want to be called weird. Most Republicans, I don't think, give a crap. They want to do their thing and be successful and be effective. They don't care what other people think. But Democrats are to take care way more about what other people think. And, you know, so they want to make themselves look smart. Look at me, I'm so smart, I've made all this money, yada, 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 yada. It's just that I don't think that they realize that because they're all trying to do that, it kind of makes it a useless metric to try and determine like where the good information is. So we have to go back to just doing the base research, finding the empirical evidence and verifying it. Still kind of rotating around 11. Although I would say that the 30-year never really kind of came off that low. There's still kind of like a ceiling over the 30. If the 30 was to meaningfully break out above 26, then maybe we would have a long trend. But then on the split side, the meta order long that I thought that we were seeing in the 10-year has now reversed and is a meta order short. So you know what? Like, this action today is really like peak summer action. This is the peak summer action that we've been looking for the past 2 weeks, and you know, keeps ending up being too busy. So maybe this is where I get to speculate a little bit. Like, seems to me like what I want to see happen is for a trend to develop. So a trend developing, probably the most likely scenario would be a second leg long comes in and we break above the open and everything. But in this scenario, what's more likely to happen is the liquidity wins and the range contracts and so forth. So isn't the correct trade here to come in like maybe one tick below the latest high and go short at like 11.5? Because this, again, is the trade where it's like, okay, every time that I try to do that mean reversion sort of a thing, doesn't work for me. Yeah, plus, we got the holiday coming up, yeah. And not really a lot of data before it. And a lot of data afterwards. You're much better off trading in 2020 than you were trading in 1999. It was much harder to make money trading back then. The market has to move significantly less in your favor before you are at break even now compared to 1999. I mean, in respect to that, transaction costs are less and that it's easier to actually like trade. That's certainly true. That's kind of like the evil little caveat there, right? Is that there was edge to be made in 1999 from electronic trading. There was people that were able to come in and provide liquidity, retail traders, and make a ton of money in the markets back in the early 2000s. But Would you have had the money and the resources to be one of those people? Probably not. So it was hard. It's like the trading is more available, but as the trading becomes more available, the edge becomes harder to find. Would like this new set of headphones that doesn't have the cords. The cord is really bothering me today. So there's this one hurts, I think, for like political purposes. So here's a picture of Kamala Harris dancing in front of Air Force plane being captured or paraded around, I guess, in Afghanistan. That's a really effective meme, I feel. Not that it's going to get traction, but that's a really effective meme, I think. China fast fashion retailer Temu soared like a rocket for 2 years. In just a few hours, its parent company lost more than $50 billion in market. Jim Cramer says you must keep faith in Nvidia even if this week's earnings fail to wow. I don't know, like the earnings have wowed like the past 3 earnings in a row, so I wouldn't bet against it. I'm not going to bet against it. Maybe that's the end, though. Maybe you get the bad earnings and then, like, the whole facade falls apart. Yeah, the plane was leaving Afghanistan. People trying to get on it to leave the place. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. It was all I remember was that it was from the disaster in Afghanistan. Some people managed to get on it and fell from their death. Wait. Really need to just get a sling for my Winter Soldier arm here. I can't even bring it up to show. I can take it's like it's just like lightly wrapped. So like I can take it off and like adjust it, rewrap it and everything. But the way that I don't know. I'm finding it difficult to like properly find a way to rest it. I'm gonna try that. Probably, honestly, during the day, I probably don't need it too bad, other than to like prevent things from pumping it. German government requested Gab dox a user because they called a female politician fat. You gotta be kidding me. Oh boy, Chicago to open state-run grocery stores? This should be fun. I'm sure that everything will just go perfectly the way that the government wants on that one. A little bit of a excursion on the downside. What did I say? I said 11.5. But where should I take the profit? Should I take it at 10.5? Or could I get 9.5? Let's see. But the thing I said was probably the movie is to sell it at 11.5. I think that was before they spiked to 13 though. So that might have scared you out of the trade. Or alternatively, you wait for the spike and then you get for it there, sure. Oh, look, they're back up to 12.5 already. That was awfully fast. What's with that one? Let us scope over to the currencies world. Seeing the dollar move here big time. Maybe, well, not so much of a move in the Japanese yen. And nothing terribly unusual in oil, but maybe some selling in oil. The S&P 500 at a pivot spot. So I see them move up. My first thought is risk headline, but I don't think that the correlated instruments and everything else seem to back that one up. So it could just be random chance. Could just be random chance. Random rollovers, that sort of a thing. I'm not sure if this is an informed order flow. Let's reset things right there. Moving the dollar has kind of subsided. Maybe we are seeing it a little bit in the Japanese yen, but it looks to me like a relatively minor one. I am seeing selling in Bitcoin today. That one's kind of curious. Still kind of looks to me like a really fast, impulsive move, primarily in the treasuries, and not a whole lot of correlations to really identify like where it might be coming from. And not a lot of evidence to suggest that it's any kind of informed order flow. Would you say that scalping is the equivalent to gambling? No. But it depends on what your definition of scalping and what your definition of gambling is, because people have very widely varying definitions of those things. Honestly, the problem with the term gambling is that the real definition in all practicality of gambling is participating in a game of chance that is in some way immoral. That's really, like, gambling, the word itself evokes that there is something wrong with what you're doing, that there's something immoral about what you're doing. That is like the history and the associations that most people make with that particular word. Right? Because if you were to say gambling is a game of chance that has no skill involved, then it's not gambling, because there is skill involved in scalping. You may not have that skill. What you're doing might be gambling. But generally speaking, I would say it's a game of skill. It's not gambling. Right? Is there something immoral about it? No, there's not. And even if you're losing money, you're helping provide liquidity to the market. It's something that the market needs. It serves a beneficial purpose. And if you're losing. But is there a lot of chance involved? Yeah, there is. There's a lot of chance involved in scalping. Especially the way that most retail traders do it. The way that most retail traders do it, it basically does become a game of chance. Is it basically like you're taking the house edge most of the time because you're taking profits that are just smaller than the current market's volatility, right? So I've we explain this all the time, but there's any different way that I can describe this, it's for the best, because it seems to be something that retail traders just don't get. It takes multiple iterations of this to help them understand it. It's just not something that people understand intuitively for some reason. If I have a market and it's going like this, right, then what the majority of quote-unquote scalping strategies do is they say, this is the range. I want my target to be within this range, and I want my stop to be well outside of this range. Okay. Which means, essentially, that in order for you to get stopped out of the trade, that it really has to strongly trend like as soon as you get in the trade. That's generally the way that they do it. So, yeah, if your target is closer than your stop, then most of the time you're going to make money. And then if you're adding like the ranges of the market and doing it in a time period where it's already kind of mean reverting, that kind of helps you a little bit. But it's a fat-tailed trade. When this happens, you lose way more than what you make when this happens. So in net, it tends not to be a profitable strategy. But that's like what most people are doing. And when you're doing that, your results really are mostly random. Like you go and you do a back test. Anytime that you add like those set stops and targets based on that kind of a risk reward ratio, your results will always converge towards the break-even win rate based on your risk, your R factor, your risk to reward. And I've seen this in pretty much every algorithm I've ever made. I will test those set stops, targets, and I see the percentages come out to about what they should be. So you're trading like that. Is there an actual edge in what you're doing? I kind of feel no. And the problem is that what it does is that like you can make money on it in the short term. You'll have a really positive looking win rate. It has all of these things about it that makes people think, oh yeah, it's totally working. But in the long run, it doesn't work because the fat tail comes in and will kill you. What's your favorite aspect of your Peter Lynch book? Oh, jeez. Well, the thing that I really like about the book, and I guess part of the reason why I promote it so much, is because you basically have the most prominent mutual fund investor of all time. Like really, nobody has been as successful at running a mutual fund as Peter Lynch was in the 80s. Warren Buffett, he gets all the attention these days because he's like the world's richest man. But I think there's a lot more to learn from Peter Lynch than there is from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is kind of in a slightly different business. If you want to learn about investing, I really think you go and you look at Peter Lynch. And what is Peter Lynch saying? Peter Lynch is saying that, hey, when we buy and sell these companies, and we have to buy so many of them because we have too much money. So, you know, we have more money than you can invest into one company. You have to spread it out across hundreds of companies. And the biggest problem that we face at a fund is like finding good stocks to invest in, enough of them to satisfy all of our capital. So what does that mean? Like the liquidity concerns and like the availability of shares to own relative to what they need to buy isn't very good. So when they come in and they do transactions, when they buy it or sell it, it moves the stock and it moves it significantly. And they know it. And that's a factor that they have to account for. And it's a factor that he talks about in the book. And he straight up says that, hey, when I buy or sell something, that moves it so far that gives you really amazing opportunities as a retail trader. If you actually know what's going on in the company, if you actually know the fundamentals and know that in the long term that this is a good stock, people could be selling it for any number of reasons. And if it happens to be on the downturn at that time, it's going to go way lower than it actually should based on, you know, what it should based on all available information. And so you get great prices. So a retail trader managing a small portfolio of like 5 stocks and buying and holding the stocks for the most part, only shifting them when the fortunes of the company changing in a meaningful way, which means that you probably can be holding on to these things for 5 to 10, 20 years in many cases, right? But when you do that, retail trader can find a considerable amount of edge because the institutions are basically leaving it out there because of the impact that their trades make. And that's the thing that I like about it. But I also like that he is encouraging people to invest in stocks, because everything that you're going to see out there on YouTube and so forth is everybody's going to say, just invest in the index fund. And I mean, they're not wrong. If you want to make the best risk-adjusted gain, your best bet is to put your money into an S&P 500 index fund. And the majority of people, you're not going to be investing more per year than you can put into your IRA, and certainly not more than you can put into your IRA and your 401k. And so for most people, it makes sense to just buy an index fund in those retirement accounts. But there's negative consequences for society, because now you have less people involved in investing and making those decisions, and we want to spread that out. We want more people to be involved. So I like that he's encouraging people, and that, you know, the top guy is saying, oh, like, there's actually a considerable amount of edge for you as a regular person to gain from doing this if you just go and you do the work. And I believe that he's right. That's what's so great about that book. Now, Octavia says, I like Jeffrey Gundlach. So as a person, Jeffrey kind of seems to have similar sensibilities to me when it comes to things like politics and so forth. But I honestly don't know a whole lot about him. Has Jeffrey written a book? Is there a book to read? That would be something probably worthwhile for me to read. Been having a hard time really digging into the books. I've kind of gotten myself into a rut where I'm kind of like, what is the point of anything? You know, I just got to keep grinding it out and doing what I do, making videos and doing my thing, and what happens. But as of late, the motivation just hasn't been coming. You read any Phil Fisher? Nope. That's the first time I've heard that name, Phil Fisher. Unless we're talking about Fisher, like there's certainly a lot of Fisher indicators that are kind of interesting. It's like a Fisher transform. That's one that I kind of was never able to figure out why that performs the way that it does. Not that it was profitable, but it did weird stuff that I didn't understand why. Do you find technical analysis as a joke? So this is another one of those, well, it depends on your definition of technical analysis. I think that quantitative analysis is a real thing. But, and there are some quantitative strategies that you can use. And one of them includes momentum, which I think a lot of people would call technical analysis. But, you know, to me, technical analysis is the way that retail traders apply it, you know, the things that retail traders do. And the things that let's say, quantitative things that retail traders teach, yeah, they are jokes. They are jokes. The market does not behave the way that they say that it does at all. They're missing some of the most important and significant insights into the market. You know? Yeah, I think they are jokes. I've made a lot of videos about, you know, the problems with technical analysis. And then a bunch of videos about, you know, where should you put your efforts instead. I digress. I think it's time for me to get going, guys. Yep, here 5 seconds and you can hear the ding. So I'm gonna get going, guys. It's kind of funny to be saying finally that quiet summer action. That quiet summer action actually does. Actually does exist. That's what. Guys, I will see you tomorrow. In the meantime, stay excellent.